People are always talking about life-changing moments. I thought such moments were supposed to be loud, flashy, like in the movies, a car accident, or a surprise marriage proposal against the backdrop of a sunset. But my moment came on Tuesday, at 2 hours and 37 minutes past noon, when I was just looking for a presentation about health insurance on my husband's phone. Garrett had forgotten his phone at home, and he urgently needed a file for a client meeting. Nothing unusual. In 8 years of marriage, I'd often helped him out in similar situations. He called me from his office number to explain where to find the file. "Brooke, honey, you're going to save me. The presentation should be in the Work March folder." Garrett's voice sounded habitually impatient. "Just forward it to my work email, okay?" "Sure," I answered automatically, even though it wasn't really convenient. I was on my lunch break and I had plans to go to the dry cleaners. "I'll find it right away." "You're the best." He tossed and disconnected. His phone lay on the kitchen table, a glossy black rectangle with a crack in the upper left corner. Garrett refused to change it, claiming it brought good luck in sales. Funny how a man obsessed with outward gloss is so superstitious about some things. The Work March folder existed, but the presentation wasn't in it. I checked downloads, then documents, then did a keyword search for health insurance. Nothing. Garrett must have gotten the file or folder name wrong, so I opened his email, which was also where I often found work stuff. And the first thing I saw was an email with the subject line, "Action Plan, Divorce Proceedings." My hand froze over the screen. My heart skipped a beat, then beat twice as fast. My first thought was ridiculous. It's some client of Garrett's. I mean, he sells insurance. But the date is yesterday, and the sender was someone named Wendy Sparks of Sparks, Ridgway and Associates. I opened the letter, even though some part of me was screaming that I'd better not. Better call Garrett and ask him directly. But I continued reading. "Garrett, per our consultation yesterday, I am forwarding an updated action plan. Key points. 1. The optimal time to apply is 2 to 3 weeks from now, after all financial documents have been prepared. 2. Regarding the $30 million family fortune. Under the current circumstances, we have a chance of getting a substantial share if we proceed with the proposed scheme. There are legitimate grounds, given your involvement in asset management over the past 5 years. 3rd, it is critical that your spouse not suspect anything until after the application has been filed. Any transfer of funds on her part will complicate the process considerably. I'll see you at 8 oder today, and don't forget the documents we talked about. Love, V. Love. I reread the letter 3 times, trying to find another explanation other than the obvious one. I couldn't find one. A strange numbness grew inside, as if I were watching a movie about someone else's life, rather than living my own. With trembling fingers, I opened other letters from the same Wendy Sparks. There were many of them, some dating as far back as December of last year, almost 4 months of correspondence. They contained legal advice, but also phrases that left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. Photographs, plans for the future, their future, without me. $30 million. My inheritance from Eleanor's grandmother, which I'd received 5 years ago. Money I never felt truly mine, more like something I should keep and one day pass on. Garrett had been so happy for me then, so supportive, helping with investments and management. I realized now that all this time he'd just been waiting for the right time. I opened a few more files. There were scans of my personal documents, account statements, some legal opinions about the possibility of challenging the prenup. Garrett was thorough. That had always been one of his virtues. The phone rang, snapping me out of my daze. "Garrett." I almost dropped the phone. "Brooke, did you find the file?" The impatience in his voice sounded different now. "Yeah." I coughed, feeling my throat dry. "I can't find it. It's not in that file." "Shit," he cursed. "Okay, whatever. I'll figure something out. Are you okay? You sound weird." "I just choked on my coffee," I lied, surprised at how calm my voice sounded. "I'm sorry I couldn't help." "It happens. I'll see you tonight." I put the phone down on the table and looked at my hands. They were trembling. Panic was building inside. But strangely, my brain was working clearer than ever. 8 years of marriage. We'd met when I'd just started working at Western Alliance Insurance, and Garrett was already a rising star in sales. He charmed me with his confidence, his ability to connect with people, all the things I was missing. Tall, with that trademark smile that made customers feel like he knew something special about life. I fell in love almost immediately, and when he proposed after 9 months of dating, I didn't hesitate for a second. We signed a standard prenup, my parents insisted. I realized now that he was only protecting what I had at the time of the wedding. The inheritance came later, and there were some legal nuances. Apparently, Wendy Sparks found a loophole. Wendy, I wonder how long they've been together. I remembered a corporate event 6 months ago when Garrett had a long conversation with some red-headed woman in a green dress. I hadn't paid much attention to it then. Garrett had always talked to people. It was part of his job and his nature. I glanced at my watch. I had 20 minutes until the end of my lunch break. Then I had to get back to the office. A normal day at Western Alliance evaluating insurance claims, filling out forms, sometimes going to the scene of an accident. Routine work that never brought me much joy, but gave me stability and comfort. Garrett had often suggested I quit, saying it wasn't necessary with our financial situation. Now I understood why he wanted me to be completely dependent on him. What do I do? Scream, smash something, call him and tell him what I thought? Dial that Wendy woman and tell her she's destroying the family? Go to a lawyer? I did none of those things. Instead, I methodically copied all the correspondence, all the documents, took a few screenshots, and sent them to my personal email. Then I carefully returned the phone to its original state, erased the traces of my search, and put it exactly where it lay. I got back to the office on time. My coworkers didn't notice anything. To them, I was still the same Brooke, the pleasant and slightly boring woman who is never late and always brings homemade cookies to communal tea parties. The quiet Brooke, who cedes the meeting room if someone needs it more. Sweet Brooke, who agrees to swap weekends and takes on difficult clients. I spent the last 4 hours of my workday in a fog, filling out forms, answering phones, smiling, nodding. Inside, I was a hurricane, but outside, it was calm. Brooke, can you stay late today? We have an urgent client, and I promised my daughter I'd pick her up from practice. Martha, my coworker, looked at me with her usual mixture of pleading and confidence that I wouldn't say no. Sorry, not today. I said no for the first time in my life, and it was surprisingly easy. I have important things to do. Martha raised her eyebrows in surprise, but didn't argue. I packed my things at 5 sharp and left the office, feeling her puzzled look on my face. Important matters. For the first time in years, these matters were all about me. I needed to think, analyze the situation, and decide what to do next. I had a few hours before Garrett got home. He rarely got home before 8, and he had a meeting with Wendy tonight. The first thing I did at home was check my email. All the files had arrived. I saved them in a password-protected folder and began to systematically go through everything I'd copied. It wasn't a pretty picture. Garrett wasn't just planning a divorce. He was preparing a full-scale financial attack. According to one of the documents, he was going to claim that he'd actively participated in the administration of my inheritance, had made a substantial contribution to its growth, and was therefore entitled to a significant portion of the estate. Technically, it wasn't even entirely a lie. Garrett had actually helped with investments. He had a financial mindset and loved to talk about diversification, stocks, bonds, and other things I'd never been particularly interested in. I trusted him on these matters. After all, he was my husband. But there was something else, more disturbing. Among the documents, I found statements from some accounts in the Caymans, transactions for large sums of money that I had never approved. It looked as if some of my money had already been withdrawn somewhere, without my knowledge. I was sitting at the kitchen table with my arms wrapped around my head when my phone rang. Garrett's number. Hey! My voice sounded completely normal, strangely enough. Are you going to be late tonight? Yes, honey. I could hear the slight wariness in his voice. A meeting with a client is running late. Don't expect me with dinner. With a client, I repeated flatly. I see. Have a good meeting. After the call, I sat still for a few minutes, then got up and went into the bedroom. There, in a jewelry box, was a business card for Trenton Lake, an old family friend and our financial advisor. Garrett had never liked Trenton, thought he was too conservative, and for the past 2 years, we'd hardly ever sought his advice. I dialed the number. Trenton Lake's office, a woman's voice answered. Good evening. This is Brooke Ventura. I need a consultation, preferably tomorrow. Just a moment. The receptionist sounded like she was checking her schedule. Mr. Lake can see you at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. Is that okay with you? More than okay, I said. Tell him it's about my inheritance and it's very urgent. Then I called work and took my first personal day off for the first time in 3 years. The department head didn't even bother to ask the reason, so uncharacteristic of me. I spent the rest of the evening on the computer, researching everything I could find about asset protection, joint property rights, and prenuptial agreements in California. I wasn't a lawyer, and much remained unclear, but the overall picture was bleak. If Garrett had indeed found a legal loophole, part of my inheritance could be at risk. At 11 o'clock, I heard the sound of a key in the lock. Garrett had returned. I quickly closed all the tabs and opened some show on Netflix. Still awake? He peeked into the living room, smelling of expensive cologne and whiskey. I decided to watch a show, I smiled at him. How was the meeting? Productive. He came over and kissed the top of my head. I think I'm going to shower and go to bed. I'm tired as a dog. Sure, I squeezed his hand. Go get some rest. When he went to the bathroom, I turned off the TV and sat in the dark for a few minutes. A strange calmness never left me. For the first time in my life, I saw the situation so clearly. Garrett hadn't just betrayed me. He was going to leave me destitute, taking everything I had. But he wasn't going to succeed. I wasn't going to be an easy target. The quiet, comfortable Brooke disappeared the moment I read the first letter from Wendy Sparks. I tiptoed up to the bedroom and got into bed, pretending to be asleep when Garrett stepped out of the shower. He slid quietly under the covers, trying not to wake me up, such a caring husband. I lay awake, listening to his steady breathing and planning my next steps. I had very little time, but I was going to make the most of every minute. I met the morning with red eyes and a clear plan of action. As Garrett got ready for work, I feigned sleepiness and a slight malaise. I don't feel well, I mumbled, pulling the blanket up to my chin. I guess I'll take the day off. Sure, rest. He leaned over and kissed my forehead, checking my temperature. Such a caring husband. I'll try to get in early today. As soon as the door closed behind him, I jumped out of bed. At 9:30, I was already parked outside the building in downtown Chico, where Trenton Lake's office was located. Trenton met me in his office, a spacious room with a minimalist design. In his mid-50s, he looked trim and energetic, with a slight gray on his temples. Brooke, what a pleasant surprise. He shook my hand firmly. I have to admit, I was surprised to get your call. It's been, about 2 years? About that. I sat down in the chair he offered me. Garrett thought we were doing fine on our own. Trenton cringed a little, but didn't say anything. He'd never openly criticized my husband, but I could always sense the tension between them. What brought you here today? I took a deep breath and pulled a folder of printed documents out of my bag. Trenton, I need complete privacy. Of course. He straightened, instantly going into professional mode. Garrett plans to divorce me and take a significant portion of my inheritance. Trenton slowly removed his glasses and wiped them with a napkin, a gesture I knew helped him collect his thoughts. Are you sure? He finally asked. Instead of answering, I put the printouts of Wendy Sparks' letters and legal documents in front of him. I can see that, he said, folding the papers neatly. And you want to know how real the threat is? That too, but most importantly, I want to protect my money. All 30 million. You know, Brooke, I always thought you deserved better, he sighed. Wendy Sparks is a shark, one of the best in the business. If she's counseling Garrett, the threat is more than real. But it's my inheritance, I exclaimed. It has nothing to do with our marriage. In theory, yes, but Garrett had been actively involved in the management of those assets for the past 5 years. In California, the courts often take that into account. Besides, he flipped through the documents. Is there any mention of joint business investments? I nodded. 3 years ago, Garrett had convinced me to invest some money in his friend's startup. About $5 million. Trenton whistled. Is that startup thriving now? I don't know. Garrett said they were having temporary difficulties, but things would pick up soon. I see. Trenton made a few notes in his notebook. It's a tricky situation, but it's not hopeless. We need to act quickly and carefully. The most important thing is to move the assets where Garrett can't get to them. Is that possible? With the right team, yes, he smiled. But we'll need someone else with certain skills. I remembered the second part of my plan. Actually, I have an idea, I said. There's a woman who works in our office, Willow Parch. I heard she used to work in cybersecurity. Do you trust her? I don't know, I answered honestly. We've barely spoken to each other, but I think she's, different. Sometimes intuition is our best counselor. Trenton looked at his watch. When do you plan on talking to her? Today. She usually has lunch in the park behind the office, alone. All right. Cell phone rings. You go ahead. I'll put together some asset protection options. I'll meet you back here this time tomorrow. When I left Trenton's office, it was 11:20. I decided to stop by the office not for work, but for reconnaissance. Brooke? Martha was surprised when I showed up. You're on sick leave today. I just stopped by to pick up some paperwork. I dismissed it. I work from home. I walked to my desk, pretending to look for papers while I kept my eyes on the office. She was walking up the stairs from the first floor, holding a mug of coffee. She was a short woman of about 35, with short, dark hair and minimal makeup. Nothing remarkable, but an attentive gaze. I waited until the clock read 12:30 and headed to the park behind the office building. Willow was sitting there on a bench under an old oak tree with a lunchbox and a book. Hi. I stopped next to her. Can I sit down? She lifted her head and looked at me with slight surprise. Sure, Brooke, she motioned. I didn't know you were in the office today. I'm not in the office, officially. I sat down next to her. Willow, I need help. Is there a problem with your computer? No, it's not the computer. I heard you used to work in financial security. Her face changed instantly, closed off, wary. Who told you that? Office rumors, I answered evasively. I really need help. It's about a large sum of money that they want to take away from me. What does that have to do with me? I decided to take a risk and tell the truth. My husband is planning a divorce and wants to take a big chunk of my inheritance. He has access to some of the accounts, and I'm afraid he's already started withdrawing money. Willow stared at me silently for a few seconds. I'm not a lawyer, Brooke. You need a good lawyer. I already have a lawyer, and a financial advisor, too. But I need someone who understands the digital side of things. Are you asking me to do something potentially illegal? She asked me directly. No, I'm asking you to protect what is rightfully mine. It's my inheritance, Willow. The $30 million my grandmother left me. Her eyebrows raised slightly at the mention of the amount. Why did you come to me in the first place? Because you're different, I answered honestly. You keep to yourself watching people, and you're one of the few people in the office who never gossip. Willow sighed and closed the lunchbox. I'll meet you after work, she finally said. At Rogers Cafe on Oak Street, 6 o'clock. I'll hear the details and see if I can help. Thank you, I breathed out in relief. Don't thank me before the time, she stood up. And, Brooke, be careful. If your husband is really planning what you're talking about, he might be watching you. The thought hadn't crossed my mind, and it sent a chill down my spine. How do I started, but Willow interrupted me. Leave your phone at home when you go to the meeting. Tell her you forgot it or that it was dead. At 5:30, I texted Garrett. Feeling better. I'm going for a walk outside. I'm leaving my phone at home because I want a break from everything. Don't worry if I don't answer. He answered almost immediately. Good idea. I'm going to be late tonight, so don't wait up. Of course he'll be late. He's got a meeting with Wendy. Rogers was a small, cozy place with a minimum of customers. Willow was already waiting for me at a table in the far corner. Did you leave your cell phone? She asked me first thing. Yeah, like you said. I told her the whole story, from the discovery of the letters to my meeting with Trenton Lake. Willow listened intently, not interrupting, only occasionally asking clarifying questions. So 30 million, she said thoughtfully. And your husband already has access to some of that money. Yes, a few accounts for sure. We managed the investments together. And the inheritance papers? Grandma's will? Where are they kept? In a safe deposit box at home and in a safe deposit box. Garrett has access to both. Willow shook her head. That doesn't make much sense. I trusted him, I said defensively. Everyone trusts until they get burned. She sipped her coffee. Okay, I'll help you, but only because I can't stand it when the strong hurt the weak. I'm not weak, I countered. Of course you're not. She smiled faintly. If you were, you'd be sobbing into your pillow right now, not planning a counterattack. I got home around 8. Garrett wasn't there yet, so I took the opportunity to go through our household financials. In the cabinet in the study, I found folders of statements, tax returns, and investment reports. As I looked through the documents, I discovered a few oddities. For example, expenses that I couldn't explain, large sums regularly withdrawn into some accounts with unclear purposes. And then there were the investment reports for the startup Garrett was talking about. According to the documents, the company had been teetering on the brink of bankruptcy for over a year. Garrett got back around 11. I was already in bed with a book. How are you? He asked, sitting down on the edge of the bed. Better, I smiled weakly. The walk had helped. Where did you walk? Bidwell Park? I lied without blinking an eye. I even ran into Lisa from accounting. She was walking her new dog. That's good. He absently stroked my arm. Are you going to work tomorrow? Yeah, if there's no fever. Reasonable, he stood up. I'm taking a shower. When the bathroom door closed, I let myself exhale. I'd passed my first exam. Garrett hadn't suspected a thing. In the morning, I went to work as usual. At 9:45, I told my coworkers I had to go to a client's office and headed to Trenton's office. Willow was already waiting there, dressed in a strict black suit. Trenton met us in his office and got down to business without further ado. I've looked into the situation, he said, laying out the documents in front of us. The threat is serious, but we have several defense options. The main problem is time. According to the letters Brooke found, we have at most 2 weeks before Garrett files for divorce. What are you suggesting? Willow asked, flipping through the papers. Create a protective financial barrier. Transfer the major assets to trusts and offshore companies that Garrett can't even get to through the courts. Is that legal? I asked. Absolutely, Trenton replied confidently. We're not hiding the assets from the IRS or other government agencies. We're just protecting them from potential abuse by your husband. What about the accounts he already has access to? Willow asked. It's more complicated there, Trenton admitted. We have to be very careful not to spook him. That's where I can help. Willow opened her laptop. If Brooke has access to online banking, we can track all recent transactions and possibly block further transfers. I have access, I confirmed. But Garrett will be notified if I change passwords or settings. Not necessarily. Willow smiled enigmatically. There are ways around those notifications. Trenton gave her an appraising look. You really know your stuff, Ms. Parch. I've seen a lot of things, she replied evasively. We spent the next 2 hours working out a detailed plan of action. Trenton explained the legal and financial aspects, Willow handled the technical side, and I provided all the information I needed about my and Garrett's accounts, investments, and assets. The plan was audacious, but doable. Within a week, we were to move all my major assets to safe havens, leaving just enough invisible accounts to avoid suspicion. In the morning, I woke up with the distinct feeling that the most important week of my life was beginning. It was 6:30 on the clock, and Garrett was still asleep. I carefully slipped out of bed and went to make breakfast like I'd done every day for the past 8 years. Scrambled eggs and bacon for him, yogurt and granola for me. The perfect wife taking care of her husband. As soon as Garrett left, I grabbed my phone and dialed Willow. We met at 8:30 at a small cafe near Trenton's office. "We have very little time," Willow said, spreading out her laptop in front of her. "Let's start with the hard part, the accounts Garrett has access to." Trenton joined us 15 minutes later. "I've prepared the paperwork to set up a trust fund in the Cayman Islands," he said, laying a folder on the table. "We need your signature, Brooke." I spent the afternoon signing papers and following Willow's instructions on setting up new accounts at various banks. By evening, the first $3 million had been transferred into new accounts that Garrett had no idea existed. "This is just the beginning," Willow warned him. "The hard part is ahead." I got home around 8, just as I'd promised Garrett I would. He showed up a half hour late, bringing wine and Chinese takeout. Such a thoughtful husband. "How was your day?" he asked, pouring the wine. "The usual," I shrugged. "And you?" "Great," he smiled. "Looks like we'll have something to celebrate soon." I shuddered at the ambiguity of his words. I wondered if he meant a divorce or a new deal. For him, though, it was probably the same thing. On the morning of the second day, as I was getting ready for work, Garrett suddenly asked, "By the way, how's our investment in the Alta Vista Fund coming along? I haven't seen the reports in a while." I almost dropped my hairbrush. The Alta Vista Fund was one of the main places where my inheritance was kept, and we withdrew the first part of the money yesterday. "It's stable as far as I know," I replied, carefully avoiding his gaze in the mirror. "Why?" "Just wondering." He shrugged with a fake indifference. "Maybe you should rethink your portfolio, increase your stake in the technology sector." "Maybe," I replied uncertainly. "Can we talk about it this weekend?" "Sure." He smiled and kissed me on the cheek. "I'll see you tonight." As soon as the door closed behind him, I dialed Willow. "He was asking about the Alta Vista," I said quickly. "I think he suspects something." "Not necessarily." Willow's voice sounded calm. "It could be a coincidence. But we need to speed up. Meet me at Trenton's at 12. At Trenton's office, I got an unpleasant surprise. The next step in our plan required Garrett's electronic signature. "Without it, we can't transfer the bulk of the assets," Trenton explained. "Those accounts are in both spouses' names." "What do we do?" I asked in a panic. "Do you have access to his computer at home?" Willow asked. "Yes, but—" "You'll need to copy his digital signature tonight." She handed me a flash drive. "There's a program here that will help you do that. Just plug it into your computer and follow the instructions." I got home before Garrett did and anxiously inserted the flash drive into his work laptop. The program worked quickly. Within minutes, I had a copy of his electronic signature. When Garrett returned, I was already cooking dinner as if nothing had happened. "What's that smell?" he asked, sniffing. "Lasagna," I answered. "Your favorite." "You're on fire tonight." He hugged me from behind. "Why don't we celebrate with a nice bottle of wine?" I tensed in his arms, but forced myself to relax. "Play your part," I reminded myself. "Great idea." I smiled through the effort. That evening, after 2 glasses of wine, I struck up a conversation about the Alta Vista, trying to find out what Garrett was interested in. Turns out, he was planning a big transfer from that fund in the next few days. Luckily, we were able to get ahead of him. The next morning started with a text from Willow. "Surgery in progress. Don't make any sudden moves." With Garrett's signature, she and Trenton transferred another $10 million into various trust funds and offshore companies. I spent the day on pins and needles, expecting a call from the bank or Garrett at any moment. But there was no call. Instead, when I got home, I got an unpleasant surprise. Garrett wasn't alone. There was a woman sitting with him in the living room, a red-haired woman in a green business suit, her eyes sharp as a blade. "Darling," Garrett stepped up to meet me. Meet Wendy Sparks, my new business partner. Wendy, the same woman who'd been writing him divorce letters, the same woman he planned to take my money and ruin my life with. And now she was sitting in my house with a glass of my wine and smiling at me with feigned friendliness. Nice to meet you, I said, extending my hand. Brooke Ventura. Likewise. Her handshake was dry and firm. Garrett's told me a lot about you. Only good things, I hope. I forced out a smile. Of course. She sipped her wine. You have a lovely home. Thank you. I turned to Garrett. I didn't know we'd have company. I'll have to cook something. Don't worry, he said with a wave of his hand. Wendy and I already had dinner. It's just a quick business meeting. I nodded and retreated to the kitchen, where I immediately texted Willow. She's here, in my house. The reply came a second later. Don't panic. Listen and memorize. Don't show what you know. I took a deep breath, made myself some tea, and returned to the living room with the look of a welcoming hostess. So what do you do, Wendy? I asked, taking a seat in the chair across from me. I'm a lawyer, she smiled. I specialize in corporate law and asset management. How interesting. I took a sip of my tea. And how long have you been working with Garrett? About 6 months, Garrett interjected, frowning slightly. Wendy's been helping us with some of the legal aspects of the investment. Which ones? I looked him straight in the eye. Brooke. His voice became strained. It's pretty complicated stuff. I don't think you're interested. On the contrary, I turned to Wendy. I'd like to know more about our finances. After all, most of the money was originally my inheritance. For a moment, there was silence in the room. Wendy and Garrett exchanged quick glances. Of course, Wendy said at last. I could arrange a consultation for you both at our office. We could discuss all the details. That would be wonderful, I smiled. Maybe next week? I'll contact your husband, and we'll find a convenient time. She set down her glass and stood up. Now, I'm afraid I have to go. Garrett volunteered to walk her to her car. I took the moment to quickly take a picture of Wendy's business card that had been left on the table and send it to Willow. When Garrett returned, his face was somber. What was that all about? He asked. What were you talking about? I acted confused. This sudden interest in finance. You've never been interested in that kind of thing before. I just thought it was time to get more involved, I shrugged. After all, it's our future together. He stared at me for a long moment, as if trying to read something on my face. Then he nodded. Sure, you're right. By the 4th day of our covert operation, we had already transferred $20 million. 10 more. But they were in accounts that required the personal presence of both spouses to withdraw. We need you to bring Garrett to the bank, Trenton said. Willow has prepared all the necessary documents, but he has to sign them in person. How am I going to do that? I asked in desperation. He'll never agree. Find a reason, Willow shrugged. Tell him you want to surprise him on your anniversary, or that you're interested in his proposal to reevaluate his investment portfolio. That evening, I caught a moment when Garrett was in a good mood after a successful deal at work. You know, I said, massaging his shoulders, I've been thinking about what you said about the technology sector. Maybe we should visit the bank tomorrow. Review our investments? He turned to me in surprise. Really? Yes, I smiled. You were right. We need to manage our money more actively. Well, he smiled back, I'm glad you finally realized that. I have a meeting tomorrow at 10, but I'm free after lunch. Great. I leaned over and kissed him on the cheek. I'll make an appointment with the bank for 2 hours. The 5th day was the busiest. Garrett and I arrived at the bank at 2 o'clock sharp. The manager, with whom Trenton had arranged in advance, ushered us into a separate office. Mr. and Mrs. Ventura, he smiled. What can I do for you today? We would like to review our investment strategy, Garrett began. In particular, to increase our stake in the technology sector. Of course, the manager nodded. I have some interesting suggestions. We spent the next hour discussing various investment opportunities. Garrett was in his element. Confident, competent, persuasive. I played the part of the interested but not too knowledgeable wife. First, we'll need to transfer money from the existing funds, the manager finally said. I have prepared all the necessary documents. He placed a stack of papers in front of us. Hidden among them, as I knew thanks to Trenton, were the documents transferring the last 10 million to a safe place. Garrett began to sign the papers, glancing over them cursorily. I held my breath as he reached the documents Willow had prepared. What's this? He frowned, reading the text. It doesn't look like a standard transfer. Oh, it's a new form, the manager said quickly. The bank updated the procedures last month. For your own safety. Garrett hesitated for another second, then shrugged and signed. I felt the tension that had been gripping my shoulders release a little. When we left the bank, he put his arm around my shoulders. You did good, he said. I'm glad you're finally taking an interest in our finances. If only he knew how much interest I had shown. Day 6 passed in anxious anticipation. I kept checking my phone, waiting for a message from Willow or Trenton that the transfer was complete. Garrett, thankfully, was busy at work and got home late. The message from Willow came while Garrett was in the shower. The deed is done. All 30 million are safe. I felt relief flood through my body. We'd made it. I had saved my inheritance. On the morning of the 7th day, Garrett left for work earlier than usual, saying he had an important meeting. I didn't think much of it, busy thinking about how my life had changed over the week. I was about to leave for work when the doorbell rang. There was a delivery guy with an envelope. Mrs. Ventura? He asked. I have some papers for you. Sign here, please. I signed and closed the door. Inside the envelope was the document I had been dreading and expecting to see at the same time. A divorce petition. Garrett Moffat versus Brooke Ventura. The document mentioned joint property, including inherited assets. I called Willow. He filed for divorce, I said, surprised at the calmness in my voice. We expected that, she replied. Don't worry, your money is safe. He'll only find out when it comes to dividing up the assets. What should I do now? Nothing. Just live your life as usual. Let him think he took you by surprise. And get a good divorce lawyer. Wendy Sparks as good as his. I hung up the phone and looked at the papers again. A strange feeling filled me, a mixture of sadness, relief, and pride. I'd done it. I had outplayed a man who thought he could use me with impunity. I didn't know what to expect after Garrett filed for divorce. Part of me thought he'd just disappear from my life, go to Wendy and wait for the court to decide. But it was more complicated than that. The day I received the divorce papers, Garrett came home as if nothing had happened. He walked through the door with a bouquet of flowers and a bottle of champagne. What's this? I asked, looking at his gifts. Isn't it obvious? He smiled. I thought we could celebrate. Celebrate what? My voice sounded flat, even though I was seething with anger inside. Our divorce? His smile faltered, but it didn't disappear. I thought you hadn't gotten the papers yet. I did this morning. I crossed my arms over my chest. It wasn't very polite of you not to even give me a heads up. Brooke? He set the bottle down on the hallway table and put the flowers beside it. I wanted to avoid an unpleasant scene. We both know that our marriage has long since exhausted itself. Really? I raised an eyebrow. And when did you come to that conclusion? Before or after you started dating Wendy Sparks? He froze, his eyes widening slightly. You know about Wendy? Of course I do, I shrugged with feigned indifference. Chico's a small town, Garrett. People talk. It was a lie, but he couldn't know that. He thought I'd learned about his affair from mutual acquaintances, not from his own phone. Look, he took a step toward me, and I automatically backed away. I didn't want you to find out like this. But now that all the cards are on the table, maybe we can resolve things in a civilized way, without any unnecessary drama? Sure, I shrugged again. You filed for divorce, I don't mind. What else do you want? I thought maybe we could discuss the division of property. He paused. Specifically, your inheritance. And there it is. The real reason for his visit. Not an apology, not an explanation. Money. What about it? I pretended not to understand. Well, as you know, I've helped manage these funds for several years. In fact, most of the capital gains are the result of my investment decisions. E. And, under California law, I'm entitled to a significant portion of those assets. His voice became businesslike, as if he were explaining the terms of the deal to a client. But I don't want to take this to court. I'm sure we can work something out. What kind of deal? I tried to speak calmly, though a fire was burning inside me. Let's say 30%. He smiled, as if he were doing me a favor. That's less than I could get through the courts. I couldn't contain my laughter. He sounded so confident, so condescending. He didn't even realize his plan had already fallen apart. Garrett, I said, looking him straight in the eye. I'd rather discuss these things through lawyers. Don't complicate things, Brooke. His tone hardened. I'm offering you a reasonable solution. If we go to court, you have a lot more to lose. We'll see, I shrugged. My lawyer will contact yours. Now, if you don't mind, I've had a rough day. Garrett looked puzzled. He'd clearly expected a different reaction. Tears, screaming, begging to stay. Or at least a willingness to give him the money right away. You've changed a lot, he said, looking at me carefully. People change, I replied, especially when they're betrayed. He took his flowers and champagne and left, promising to come back for his things the next day. As soon as the door closed behind him, I called Willow. He came by, I said. He wanted to negotiate 30% of the inheritance. 30% of $30 million isn't a bad deal, she snorted. What did you say? That I'd communicate through lawyers. Good for you, she said with approval. Get ready for him to find the money missing soon, and then the real fun will begin. She was right. 3 days later, on my way home from work, Garrett's car was parked outside my house. He was sitting on the porch, and even from a distance, I could see he was furious. Where's the money, Brooke? He jumped up as soon as I got out of the car. What money? I calmly walked past him to the door. Don't play with me. He grabbed my arm. 30 million! Your inheritance! It's gone from all the accounts. I pulled my hand free and looked at him with cold fury. Don't touch me. My voice was quiet but firm. Don't ever touch me again. He pulled back, surprised by my reaction. Listen. His tone became almost pleading. I need that money. You don't understand what I've gotten myself into. What exactly don't I understand, Garrett? I opened the door and walked into the house. He followed me in. I have debts. He ran his hand through his hair. Serious debts. To people you don't want to mess with. What kind of debts? I set my bag on the hallway table and turned to him. Remember my friend Derek's startup? The one we invested $5 million in? Of course I remember, I nodded. You said they were having temporary difficulties. Well, difficulties is an understatement. He grinned bitterly. The company went bankrupt 6 months ago. What? I was really shocked. Why didn't you tell me? Because that wasn't the only problem. He sank down on the couch, suddenly looking tired and aged. I borrowed money to cover the losses. I thought I could pay it back with interest when I had access to your inheritance. You borrowed the money. From who? People who aren't very patient. He looked up at me. They gave me until the end of the month. If I don't pay them back, they'll, do something bad. I stared at him, not believing my ears. The man I married, the man I trusted, not only cheated on me and planned to steal my money, but also got involved in some criminal schemes. How much? I asked. 8 million, he swallowed. With interest. 8 million, I repeated the amount, feeling the anger building inside me. And you were planning to pay with my money? Without my knowledge? I had no choice. He jumped up. You don't understand. These people don't mess around. Do you think I'm joking? I took a step toward him. You cheated on me, Plan to rob me, and now you expect me to save you? I'm your husband, for crying out loud. You're my almost ex-husband, I corrected. And you're the one who ruined everything. Ah, Brooke. His voice became softer, pleading. I know it's my fault. I'll fix it, I swear. Just help me now, for the sake of everything that's happened between us. Before, I would have given in. Before, I would have believed him, felt sorry for him, helped him. But not now. No, I said firmly. You take care of your own problems, and tell Wendy she shouldn't count on my money either. The mention of Wendy seemed to turn something off in him. His face contorted with rage. You'll regret this, he hissed. I'll tell everyone what you're really like. The cold, calculating bitch who didn't help her husband when he was in trouble. Tell them, I shrugged. And I'll tell you how you planned to steal my money. How you cheated on me with the lawyer who helped you do it. How you got into debt with some gangsters. We'll see who's believed. He stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time. You knew everything? From the beginning? Go away, Garrett. I opened the front door. You have keys to the guest house. You can stay there until you find another place. But don't come to this house again. He left, slamming the door so hard the glass shook. I sank down onto the couch, feeling the adrenaline leave my body. It was strange. I'd just lost my husband. The man I'd lived with for 8 years, but I felt nothing but relief. The next day, the office was strangely quiet. People whispered when I walked by and were silent as soon as I entered the room. By lunchtime, I realized that rumors had already begun to spread. Martha, my coworker, caught me in the cafeteria. Brooke, honey, she sat down next to me. I heard about your divorce. I'm so sorry. Thank you. I nodded politely. But you know, she leaned closer, lowering her voice. There's a rumor that Garrett's been seeing another woman. Is that true? Yes. I sipped my coffee calmly. Wendy Sparks, the lawyer. Oh my God! Martha clamped her hand over her mouth. And you knew? I just found out a while ago. I shrugged. But it doesn't matter now. Of course, darling. She patted my arm. If you need to talk or have a drink tonight, I'm always here for you. Thank you, Martha. I smiled at her. But I'm fine, really. And the strange thing was, I really was fine. Much better than I'd expected. Willow called me in the evening. You're the center of attention, she said without preamble. The whole office is buzzing. Some say Garrett's a scumbag. Others say you kept the money from him. Let them talk. I leaned back on the couch. I don't care. You should. Her voice became serious. Garrett's spreading rumors that you transferred all the money in advance to deprive him of his rightful share. He's playing the victim. And does anyone believe it? Some. He always had a way with words, didn't he? I remember. Garrett had a way of convincing people, getting them to trust him. It was his talent, his job, his life. What should I do? I asked. Nothing, Willow answered confidently. Just live your life. The truth always comes out. The next day, I ran into Wendy Sparks at the supermarket. She was standing in the wine department, studying a bottle of red. Mrs. Ventura, she nodded coldly. Ms. Sparks, I replied in the same tone. How's your client doing? My client? She raised an eyebrow. Garrett, I smiled. Or is he no longer your client? Just a boyfriend? I don't discuss my clients. She put the bottle in the basket. And I don't discuss my personal life either. Of course, I nodded. But, if you were hoping for a big payoff from our divorce, I'm afraid you're in for a disappointment. She gave me a sizing look. You're not as simple as you look, Mrs. Ventura. No one is, Mrs. Sparks. I took a bottle of white wine from the shelf. Have a good evening. I walked away, feeling her gaze between my shoulder blades. It was a strange moment. I'd never talked to people like that before, especially a confident woman like Wendy. But something had changed in me over the days. I was no longer afraid of conflict, no longer trying to please everyone, no longer trying to be comfortable. A week after we talked, Garrett came again. He looked terrible unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, wrinkled clothes. Wendy left me, he said when I opened the door. Said she couldn't go out with a man who couldn't even support himself. And you came here to tell me that? I crossed my arms over my chest. I came to apologize. He lowered his head. I ruined everything, Brooke. All the good things I had in my life were you, and I didn't appreciate that. I'm sorry you're only realizing that now. I didn't invite him in, and he remained standing on the threshold. I can fix this, he said, hope in his eyes. We can start over. I'll be a better husband, I swear. Garrett? I shook my head. It's not going to work. I don't love you anymore. And honestly, I'm not sure I've ever really loved you. His face contorted in pain. You can't say that. 8 years, Brooke. 8 years together. 8 years that taught me one thing. My worth isn't in how much money I have, or what kind of man I'm married to. My worth is in me. Beautiful words? He grinned bitterly. Easy to say when you have $30 million in the bank. It's not about the money, I shook my head. It's that you only saw me as a means to an end, first as a status wife, then as a source of money, but never just a person. That's not true. It is. I looked him firmly in the eye. And you know what the saddest part is? I also saw in you not a man, but an idea. The idea of an ideal husband, strong, confident, successful. Someone who would solve all my problems, make me happy. We were both wrong, Garrett. He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. Maybe you're right. But what now? Everyone lives their own lives. And about the problems, I shook my head. Solve them yourself. I closed the door, cutting off his protests. Maybe it was cruel, but I could no longer save the man who was trying to destroy me. The next day, everyone in the office was whispering again, but about something else. Turns out Garrett had quit the company and left Chico in a hurry. No one knew where he'd gone or why he'd left so suddenly. They say he owed money to some dangerous people, Martha whispered, leaning across my desk, and he ran away to avoid paying them back. Did he? I pretended to be surprised. Yes, and they say Wendy Sparks left him when she found out about the debts, Martha said, delighted with the fresh gossip. What a calculating woman she is. I didn't say a word. Who was I to judge Wendy? She wanted money and status, just like Garrett. They were the perfect couple in their own way. That evening, I met Trenton and Willow at a small restaurant on the outskirts of town. To a successful operation, Trenton raised his glass of wine. And to the new Brooke, Willow added, clinking her glass with mine. The new one? I smiled. Sure, she nodded. The Brooke I met 2 weeks ago would never have been able to handle what you've been through. You've changed. I wondered. Had I really changed? Or was I just finally being me, the person I'd always been deep down inside, but was afraid to show? You know, I said, looking at my new friends, I'd always thought my worth was determined by what other people thought of me. Garrett, co-workers, casual acquaintances. I tried to be comfortable, pleasant, not cause problems. And somewhere along the way, I lost myself. And now, Trenton asked, now I know that my value is in myself. Who I am, not what I have, or who's around me. And that's liberating. 6 months flew by like a day. I looked out the window of my new office on Chico's Main Street and couldn't believe how much had changed. Garrett's divorce had been finalized quickly. He hadn't delayed the process when he realized he couldn't get anywhere near the money. No one knew exactly where he'd disappeared to. There were rumors of Mexico or Canada. I didn't care. On the table in front of me were the documents for the Ventura Financial Defense Fund, my new brainchild, which I had created a month after the divorce was finalized. The idea had come out of the blue during one of our meetings with Willow. You know, she said then, you're not the only woman who's been ripped off through marriage. I understand, I nodded, but not everyone has friends like you and Trenton. Exactly, she looked at me meaningfully. Not everyone. That's how the foundation was born. I invested $5 million of my inheritance, hired a team of lawyers and financial advisors, and we started helping women and men in situations of partner financial abuse. legal clinics, shelters, economic education programs. In just 6 months, we helped over 100 people. Each success story energized me. My secretary, Carol, came into the office. Brooke, I've sent out invitations to the fundraiser. 200 people have confirmed attendance. Great, I smiled. What about the press? 3 local stations and a newspaper. There might be a regional TV station. That's great. The fundraiser was to be the first major public event of our foundation. We were planning to raise money to open a financial education center in Chico. I was nervous, but it was a pleasant excitement that had nothing to do with the paralyzing fear I used to feel before any performance. I had not only changed internally, I gave up my habit of being inconspicuous, changed my closet to a more colorful one, cut off my shoulder-length hair, and started practicing yoga. My co-workers at the insurance company I had long since parted ways with barely recognized me in casual encounters. "You look amazing," they said. "The divorce has obviously been good for you." I just smiled back. It wasn't about divorce. It was about finding myself. Garrett. I hadn't seen him since signing the divorce papers and was unpleasantly surprised to see him. "What are you doing here?" I asked, not trying to hide the coldness in my voice. "Brooke." He took a step toward me. "You look beautiful." "Thank you." I didn't move. "What do you want?" "To talk." He looked better than the last time we'd talked. Shaved, trim, in an expensive suit. "Can I come in?" "No." I shook my head. "We can talk here." He sighed but didn't insist. "I heard about your foundation. It's impressive. How did you even know where I lived?" I'd moved out of our shared house almost immediately after the divorce, buying a small but cozy house closer to the center of town. "Chico is a small town." He repeated my same words with a slight smile. I waited silently for him to get to the point. "I've changed, Brooke," he finally said. "These months away from everything, they've made me rethink a lot of things." "Good for you?" My tone made it clear that I hadn't. "I want to undo what I've done." He took another step toward me. "Give us a second chance." "There is no us, Garrett." I shook my head. "There can't be any second chances." "Please, just hear me out," he said, a pleading tone in his voice. I was blinded by greed, tempted by temptation. But I never stopped loving you. "You want my money?" I stated the fact. Again. "No." He looked insulted. "It's not about the money." "It's not?" I raised an eyebrow. "Then what is it?" "I miss you." He looked me straight in the eye, and I could almost believe the sincerity of his gaze. Almost. Our home, our life. A life where I was the convenient, obedient wife who could be manipulated? "No, thank you." I stepped around him and walked up to the porch. "Goodbye, Garrett." "Wait," he caught my arm. "You're right. I need your help. These people I owe money to. They found me. This is it. Told you it wasn't about the money. What do you want from me?" "A loan," he said quickly. "Just $2 million. I'll pay it back with interest as soon as I get back on my feet." "Why should I help you?" I pulled my hand free. "Because, against all odds, we've been a family for 8 years. His voice got harder. "And because I can tell everyone how you cheated the system by hiding the money before the divorce." Blackmail. Of course it was. Garrett never changed. "Tell me." I shrugged. "You think anyone cares? I started a foundation that helps people, and you're the man who cheated on his wife, had a mistress, and planned to steal her inheritance. Who do you think will be believed?" He looked at me with ill-concealed rage. "You'll regret this," he hissed. "It's as easy to destroy a reputation as it is to build one." "Are you threatening me?" I shook my head. "That's not a good idea, Garrett. I have copies of all your correspondence with Wendy, documents about loans to questionable individuals, plans to embezzle my inheritance. I don't think you want that to go public." He's pale. "You're bluffing." "Check." I opened the door. "Now get off my porch." He left, muttering curses. I closed the door and leaned against it, feeling my knees shake. Despite all my new confidence, seeing Garrett had stirred up unpleasant memories. The day of the fundraiser came sooner than I expected. The Grand Chico Hotel was ablaze with lights, a string of expensive cars lined up at the entrance. I was nervous, but not like before. It was the excitement of anticipation, not fear. In an elegant navy blue dress, I greeted the guests at the entrance to the hall. Many came up to express admiration for my work, which still seemed odd. I had rarely been noticed at events like this before. "You're radiant," Trenton said, coming up to me with a glass of champagne. "A real hostess for the evening." "Thank you," I accepted the glass. "Couldn't have done it without you." "Don't minimize your accomplishments." He looked at me seriously. "This is your victory, Brooke, your strength." Willow joined us, elegant in a simple black dress. "Impressive evening." She looked around the room. "Looks like the whole town's here." "Not all of it." I noticed a familiar figure at the entrance. "Looks like we have an intruder." Garrett stood in the doorway, looking around the hall. When he spotted us, he headed straight for our group. "Brooke?" He nodded to me, then to Trenton and Willow. "It's a beautiful evening." "You weren't invited," I said coldly. "I made a generous donation." He smiled. "Anonymous, of course." "And why are you here?" "To support a good cause." His smile grew wider. "And perhaps talk to some of your influential guests." The threat was obvious. He'd come to ruin my evening, maybe even spread some rumors among the guests. "I wouldn't advise it," Willow said quietly, taking a step toward him. "Not if you value your reputation." "Ah, the mysterious Willow Parch." He turned to her. "Or should I call you Agent Parker?" I looked at Willow in surprise. She hadn't changed her face, but I could see her shoulders tense. "You've done your research," she replied calmly. "Impressive." "Not so hard if you know where to look." Garrett shifted his gaze to Trenton. "And Mr. Lake, or should I say Lambert, a former federal prosecutor who mysteriously left the service and changed his name. Interesting company you keep, Brooke." I dazedly shifted my gaze from Willow to Trenton. "What's going on?" "Enough," Trenton said firmly. "You came here to cause trouble, but it's not going to work." "Isn't it?" Garrett grinned. "What if I told everyone here that the famous Financial Defense Fund was based on money illegally hidden from a spouse during a divorce? That the great advocate for victims of financial abuse broke the law herself?" "But that's not true." I shook my head. "I protected what was mine. With the help of a former federal agent and prosecutor." He smiled. "Very convenient." At that moment, another figure approached us, Wendy Sparks. She looked flawless in an emerald dress that emphasized her red hair. "Garrett," she nodded coldly at him. "I didn't expect to see you here." "Wendy?" He was clearly surprised to see her. "What are you—" "I received an invitation." She raised her champagne glass. "From Ms. Ventura." Now it was Garrett's turn to look shocked. He turned to me. "Did you invite her?" "Of course," I smiled. "Ms. Sparks has become one of our foundation's legal advisors. For free." "What?" He shifted his gaze from me to Wendy. "After I've been rethinking a lot of things," Wendy said calmly, "and decided that my skills could serve a better purpose than enriching myself at the expense of other people's problems." "You betrayed me," Garrett hissed. "No, darling." She shook her head. "I simply corrected a mistake. As you should do." He stared at the four of us, and I could see the realization slowly dawning on him. He'd lost. Finally and irrevocably. "You planned this whole thing," he whispered. "No, Garrett." I shook my head. "You planned this. Your greed, your selfishness, your manipulation. We just didn't let you win." He gave us one last look of hatred and walked quickly out of the hall. "He could have been a good man," Wendy said thoughtfully, looking after him. "If he'd only wanted to." "But he didn't." Trenton shrugged. "His choice." We stood in silence while I digested what I'd heard. "So," I finally said, "a former federal agent and prosecutor?" Willow and Trenton exchanged glances. "We worked together," Willow began. In the Financial Crimes Task Force. Trenton, then Lambert, was the prosecutor. I was the agent. We were investigating a major fraud case, Trenton continued. We bonded. And then, when I came to you for help, I started. It was a chance to fix something, Willow nodded. To help someone who really needed protection. Thank you. I was touched by their story. For everything. Wendy coughed delicately. I should probably leave you two alone. No, stay. I smiled at her. You're part of the story, too. And frankly, I'm glad you've decided to help our foundation. It's the least I could do. She looked slightly embarrassed. After everything that had happened, the four of us stood there, an odd bunch, united by a shared past and perhaps future. Carol walked across the room to the stage and signaled that it was time for the formal part to begin. I think they're waiting for you. Trenton nudged me toward the stage. I stepped up to the podium, looking out at the filled auditorium. 200 people were staring at me, waiting for my speech. Before, this moment would have scared me to the point of shaking at the knees. Now I felt nothing but confidence. Good evening, I began, my voice firm. I am pleased to welcome you to the first fundraiser for the Ventura Financial Defense Fund. 6 months ago, I experienced a betrayal that could have broken me, but instead made me stronger. Looking at the faces of the guests, at Willow and Trenton standing next to me, at Wendy listening intently from the front row, I realized that I had finally found myself. Money had never been the cause of my insecurity. It had been my dependence on other people's opinions, on other people's approval. Now I was free of that. I continued to speak, and with each word I felt my inner strength growing, the strength that had always been inside me, waiting for the moment to emerge.